It was supposed to be just another morning. The kind of morning people don't think twice about. Cool air, quiet surroundings, a sense of calm that feels almost automatic. The world hadn't fully woken up yet, and for most people, that's exactly what makes it feel safe. Laken Riley stepped outside with a purpose. Running wasn't just exercise for her, it was routine, discipline, a moment to clear her mind before the rest of the day began, something she had done many times before without hesitation. And that's exactly why what happened next feels so disturbing. Because nothing about that morning suggested danger. There were no warnings, no signs, no reason to believe that this routine, something so normal, would become the last thing she ever did. Hours later, that same quiet path would be surrounded by investigators. And the question everyone kept asking was simple. How does something like this happen, in a place that feels completely safe? Laken Riley was 22 years old. A nursing student with a future that felt clear and full of direction. People who knew her didn't describe her as someone reckless or impulsive. Quite the opposite. She was focused, driven, someone who had goals and was actively working toward them. Her life wasn't chaotic. It wasn't unpredictable. It followed structure, the kind of structure that gives people a sense of control. Friends remember her as someone who balanced things well. She worked hard, but she also made time for herself. Running became one of those moments. A reset, a habit, something consistent. And consistency, while comforting, can also create patterns. Patterns that repeat. Patterns that become predictable. And sometimes, predictability can be seen. That morning, she went for a run near the University of Georgia campus. A place where students moved freely. A place that felt familiar, safe. But familiarity can be deceptive. Because danger doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it waits. As time passed, and Laken didn't return, concern began to build. At first, it wasn't panic. People lose track of time. Phones run out of battery. Plans change unexpectedly. But something about the silence felt wrong. Calls went unanswered. Messages unread. The kind of silence that slowly shifts from normal to unsettling, and then to something much worse. When authorities began looking into her disappearance, they weren't dealing with uncertainty anymore. They were dealing with evidence. The area where she had been running was no longer just a trail. It was a potential crime scene. Investigators began piecing together her last known movements. Every step mattered. Every minute. Security cameras were reviewed. Witnesses were questioned. Digital data was analyzed. Each piece offering a fragment of the truth, but never the full picture. And that's where the tension began to build. Because what they were seeing didn't point to an accident. It suggested something deliberate, something intentional, and that realization changes everything. Because accidents create confusion. Intent creates fear. As investigators continued working, they began focusing on a critical question. Was this random, or was it preventable? Because in cases like this, the difference matters. A random act suggests unpredictability, but a preventable act suggests something much harder to accept. That warning signs may have existed and weren't seen in time. The investigation started narrowing in on individuals who had been in the area, people who didn't belong, people whose presence raised questions, and, slowly, a suspect emerged. But identifying a suspect doesn't end a mystery. Sometimes it deepens it. Because now the question becomes, why? Why her? Why that moment? Why that place? Criminal behavior often isn't as chaotic as people imagine. It's observant. It watches patterns, waits for vulnerability. Detective voice tone. Crimes like this don't always happen in a moment of impulse. Sometimes, they happen because someone recognizes an opportunity and decides to act on it. That possibility is what made this case so unsettling, because it suggests something far more disturbing than randomness. It suggests awareness, planning, patience, and that changes how people see the world around them. As more details came forward, the case began attracting attention far beyond the local community. It became part of a larger conversation about safety, about awareness, about how quickly a normal moment can turn into something irreversible, because that's what makes this story so difficult to process. Nothing about it felt extraordinary until it was. The timeline investigators built revealed something chilling. There was no dramatic confrontation, no loud warning, no moment where everything suddenly shifted in an obvious way. Instead, it unfolded quietly, step by step, until it was too late. And that's what makes cases like this stay with people, because they don't feel distant. They feel possible, too possible. As the investigation progressed, the focus shifted toward understanding the final moments. Not just what happened, but how it happened. How someone could move through a familiar space and not realize they were in danger. How quickly control can be lost. How little time there can be to react. These aren't easy questions. And they don't have comforting answers. Because sometimes the truth isn't something dramatic or cinematic. Sometimes it's something much simpler and much harder to accept. That vulnerability can exist anywhere, even in routine, even in places that feel safe. When the suspect was officially identified, it brought a sense of direction to the case, but it didn't bring closure, because closure requires understanding. And understanding requires answers to questions that don't always have clear explanations. The focus shifted toward accountability, toward what could be proven, toward what could be explained in a way that made sense. But emotionally, it still didn't, because for Laken's family, this wasn't about legal processes. It was about loss. A future that was suddenly gone. Moments that would never happen. Conversations that would never take place. And those are the parts of a story that don't show up in reports, but matter the most. As the case continued to unfold, its impact spread, not just through media coverage, but through conversations. People began questioning their own routines, their own sense of safety, their own assumptions about what is normal, because stories like this force people to confront something uncomfortable. That safety is often a feeling, not a guarantee, and that realization lingers. It doesn't fade quickly. It stays in the back of people's minds, changing how they move, how they think, how they see the world around them. Laken Riley's story became more than a case. It became a reminder of how quickly life can change, how fragile normal moments really are, and how important awareness can be. But even with that awareness, one question continues to echo. Could this have been prevented? It's a question that doesn't have a simple answer, because prevention isn't always clear in hindsight. But the question still matters, because asking it is how people try to make sense of something that doesn't feel like it should have happened. In the end, what remains isn't just the details of the case. It's the impact, the emotional weight, the silence left behind. Because when someone is taken suddenly, what stays isn't just memory, it's absence. And absence has a way of changing everything. Laken Riley went for a run that morning, just like she had before. Same mindset, same routine, same expectation that she would return. But this time, something was different. Something unseen, something unexpected. And that difference changed everything. Because sometimes, the most dangerous moments aren't the ones that feel dangerous. They're the ones that feel completely normal, right up until they aren't. If stories like this matter to you, if you believe these cases deserve to be remembered, consider subscribing. We bring real true crime stories that go deeper than headlines. Leave your thoughts in the comments. What do you think happened? And what could have been done differently? And if you want more stories like this, stay with us. Because sometimes, awareness is the only way these stories continue to be told.